Ah, classic scene. The finale of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Such a wonderful film. I hadn't seen that for probably since it came out. That's hard to believe it was 50 years ago. And so you're probably wondering, like I was at the time I saw the movie, I wonder how much of this is true. And of course, the classic opening to the movie is not that it matters, but much of what you're about to see is true. And I just thought that was such a clever little line there in the beginning. So let's take a look at what really happened to Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. As you know, they ended up down in South America. They were wandering around, and they ended up in Bolivia, and they pulled off a payroll robbery at Dead Cow Hill. You can't make that up. And they made a run past Tupiza, and they came into San Vicente, which is at 14,500 feet. Now, I got to tell you that my son was in the Peace Corps, and I went down to Peru to see him, and he was in a valley at 10,500 feet. And it really, for people that live up in the United States, it's really hard to breathe. Not real hard, but you'll wake up in the night and kind of catch your breath because it's that high. And so this is the country that Butch and Sundance were in at the end. And they rode into San Vicente, which is high up in the mountains. And they just were described as two Americanos on jaded mules. And they pulled into the town, and notice there that Butch is riding a mule with a Q brand on its neck, which was the brand of the Amarillo mining company that they robbed the payroll. And they asked if there was an inn, and one of the locals said, "We don't have an inn here, but you can stay at Casiola's house, and he'll get you some feed for your mules." And so they made an arrangement. They went and they showed him his room, which was on a patio. And I believe we have an actual photograph of that patio. This is really kind of cool. That's the actual patio, and that's the room that they were in. This was taken at a different time, of course. They asked for sardines and beer. I just love that because obviously if you're in a foreign country, you don't want to drink the water if you're going from different locations. And so beer would be a remedy for that. And then sardines in a can, and you're going to be able to eat that. It turns out it was their last meal on Earth, and they had the sardines, and they were talking to the local. His name was Belote. And after he left, after some small talk, he went over to another person's house, and there was a 5-man posse from Uyuno, which had been called down, and they were telling that everybody, the locals, be on the lookout for 2 Americans on mules. So now the captain wasn't there, but the 3 guys who were there loaded their rifles, and they returned with Belote to the patio that we just saw. And as they were walking across the patio, one of the Americans appeared in the doorway, pulled a Colt 45, and shot directly at the lead guy. His name was Torres, and he was shot on the neck, and he ran and collapsed at a nearby house and died within minutes. 2 of the others sought protection, but returned volleys of rifle fire through that door. By now, the captain had come to the scene, the captain of the posse from Ionio, and he said he ordered Belote to go get locals to guard the back of the house and the roof to make sure that the outlaws didn't escape out the back. And Belote later testified that he heard 3 anguished cries as he was going. They came back, they surrounded the place. They waited. It was the minutes turned into hours. It was very cold and windy, and they stayed there all night. Everybody was afraid to approach the room. There were no more gunfire. And in the morning, they peered inside, and they saw the 2 dead outlaws. One, who we believe was Butch Cassidy, was spread out on the floor, and he had a wound in his arm and a wound in his temple. And the Sundance Kid was oddly sitting on a bench with his arms around a great big jug, like a ceramic bowl of some sort. And he had a wound in the forehead and a couple of wounds on his arms. The we surmise now that Sundance was wounded badly and asked Butch to put him out of his misery. They probably had an outlaws agreement that if it ever came to this, this is what they do. They didn't want to go back to prison, certainly not in South America. And he asked him to shoot him and put him out of his misery. And that was perhaps the cry that Below heard. So the two men, the outlaws that were killed, were buried that afternoon. But I love this. This is from my book on the subject, which is the Illustrated Life, and the Classic Gunfights, Volume 3. But I love this because they actually printed the personal effects of money and found on the outlaws, and it's very interesting. On Butch, they found one leather purse containing a paper on which the address of a La Paz postcard was written. One 6-shot Colt revolver with holster and belt and 30 cartridges. One silver pocket watch with silver chain. 2 notebooks with several notations. 16 pounds of sterling, that's money. 2 half-pound sterling notes. And 1 silver coin worth 5 cents. 1 unusable pocket mirror, and I wonder if that was hit by gunfire, perhaps. 2 removable buttons. 1 metal comb, 7 cards inscribed to Enrique B. Hutchison, 7 cards inscribed to Edward Graydon, 1 linen handkerchief, and 1 black pencil. On the Sundance Kid, they found 1 18-karat gold watch, number 93220, without crystal, 1 leather and metal lasso. What is a metal lasso? I would love to know what that is. Bills and coins of various denominations from Bolivian banks totaling 93 Bolivianos and 5 cents. 1 nickel penknife. 1 English dictionary. I love this. You're going to be an outlaw in Bolivia. You got to have a dictionary, okay? 2 linen handkerchiefs. 1 ordinary pocket mirror. 9 removable shirt buttons. 2 cufflinks. 8 small wooden or bone buttons. 1 waterproof cloak. 121 Winchester cartridges, and 1 new modified Winchester carbine. They found other stuff in their saddlebags, including the Armayo payroll. They were expecting 80,000, and they only got 6, which is they think they were kind of upset, and that's why they took the mule. And of course, you'll know that in the movie, they actually show that. In fact, so much of the movie has a genesis in real life, and including the ending, which we'll get to in a minute, because one man, in my estimation, saved Butch and Sundance from anonymity. Because what happened was in the 1920s, you had a couple of characters out of the Old West who were rediscovered and brought back to life, or given new notoriety. And the first one, the most obvious one, is Billy the Kid, who was forgotten until Walter Noble Burns brought him back from anonymity. And the next thing you know, he's standing shoulder to shoulder with Kit Carson and Wild Bill Hickok and Custer and Crazy Horse and all of the normal icons that we know and love. And then the second person was Wyatt Earp, who Walter Noble Burns and Stuart Lake actually brought back. And so you had this genesis through the 30s and the 40s and the 50s. So they were digging to try to find new characters. And some of them they found, like Texas John Slaughter. These are B characters who they brought up, and he got his own TV show, and it kept going like that. But this is really late in the game. We're talking about the mid 60s, and the genre was kind of played out, and there really wasn't anything new. And so it was interesting to me that a guy who wrote under the pseudonym of Harry Longbaugh, sound familiar? He wrote a wonderful a movie. It was his first screenplay, and No Way to Treat a Lady. It later became a movie and a screenplay. And he used the Sundance Kid's real name as a pseudonym. And his real name was William Goldman. And William Goldman is really the person who saved, if you will, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And he, of course, was enamored of the story. Obviously, if he's using her Longbaugh as a pseudonym to write with, and he was really loved the story, and so there was a huge bidding war in Hollywood for this screenplay, his first time screenplay of someone, and it sold for $400,000, which at the time was just unheard of. It was about $3 million worth today, and of course the screenplay is just full of such classic lines. You know them; they're just fantastic. Everybody else has bifocals, and I have vision. Hey kid, he says, I just want you to know I've never killed anyone. This is during one of the last gunfights, and I also love the line about what's wrong with that bank? And he says, well, they kept robbing it. And he says, well, that's a small price to pay for beauty. Just really, really clever writing by Mr. Goldman. And what you have to realize is that Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid now in the 60s, I was a fan of them. They were a regional, you had to dig deep to kind of get into them in the Wild Bunch, which they were members of. And but me and about maybe 10 people in Wyoming knew who they were until William Goldman brought them back. And he not only brought them back, but they are now legendary, and in many ways are probably head and shoulders above some of those older, tired guys like Billy the Kid, dare I say. I love the names of the Wild Bunch. You don't hear them enough. LZ Lay. That is such a crazy name. LZ. It sounds like a woman. It's not. LZ Lay was one of Butch's pards that he loved. The Tall Texan. I just love that. Flat Nose Curry. You can't make that up. But one of my favorites is OC Camilla Hanks. Now, what kind of an outlaw has a name Camilla? I don't know. Anyway, so the movie just exploded, and it's just absolutely wonderful that we have this movie about these two guys. In fact, they call it the first buddy movie that became very popular after that with a buddy picture, and it really has some really wonderful things in it. Now, one of the things that I've discovered is this isn't in the movie, but I believe it, and that is, how did they figure out to go to South America? And as a matter of fact, one of the sticking points with the film and the screenplay is one of the Hollywood studio execs, the suits, said, "Oh, wait a minute. Okay, you can't leave John Wayne never left the West. Can you leave the West and go to South America?" They really had to get their mind around that. In fact, there was even suggestions that they take that out and just keep them in the West. They love the script, but we don't want to know like that. And he held firm, and they, of course, filmed the classic movie that it is. And another thing that I find really fascinating is that at a place, there's a great photo of Sundance Kid in Etta Place, taken in New York City. She is beautiful, and some of the historians now believe that that was a Pinkerton typo, and that her name really wasn't Etta, it was Ethel. Well, I don't know about you, but Ethel just is not going to cut it. Etta Place will forever be, in my mind, typo or no typo. That will be the name that lives on. This is known as the Cholula Ranch photo, and it's a photo that Butch Cassidy sent back to the United States. When they first went there, they ended up in Argentina at a place called Cholula, and that's Butch Cassidy on the left with a vest on next to the horse, and that's Sundance Kid at far right, second from right, and that's the beautiful Etta Place in front of her horse. Here's what Butch said about the place. I like the place better every day. I have 300 cattle, 1,500 sheep, and 28 good saddle horses. 2 men do my work. I also have a good 4-room house, stable, chicken house, and some chickens. The country is first class. Isn't that fascinating? All right, this is a great photo. This is considered one of the last photos taken of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. This is the high in the Andes. That's Butch at far left in the background there on his mule. And that is the Sundance Kid working on the bridle there. That's the gear that they had when they died. This is just a fabulous photo of the two. I think that there's an old saying that facts lined up doesn't make the truth. Okay. And it's really true here. It's that, do you want to see that story that I described of how they possibly really died? Or do you want to see the one that we just watched at the beginning, which is them having a conversation about going to Australia? And then the great line where he's Butch, Paul Newman, is trying to pitch it. They're dying. They're shot all to pieces and they're going to go out. And he's trying to sell the beach. And Robert Redford, as the Sundance Kid, said, "No swimming," because he couldn't swim because of the famous jump scene. Another thing that I just find really phenomenal is that George Roy Hill, the director of this wonderful movie, I read somewhere that he watched like 200 Westerns, one a day. And in those days, in the 60s, they didn't have video cassettes, that kind of thing. And so an assistant from the studio would bring canisters of films, and he would order these Westerns one a day, and they would set them up at his house, and they had to have a projector, and he had to watch them, and he would take notes. And most of the Westerns, he claimed and knew, were not very good, but there would be one thing. There would be this scene that he really liked. He said, "I'm going to use that." And then he would have another one. He said, "I'm going to use that." And one of my favorite scenes in the movie is the posse, or Butch and Sundance, are riding along, and they go down into a draw. We don't see them, and they're still talking, and then they come up over the other side. And I believe that's one of the scenes that he poached from his 200 Westerns that he watched. So as you might be able to tell, this is a really special movie for me. I just cannot give William Goldman enough credit. He got 2 Oscars, one for the screenwriting on Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and the other one for All the President's Men, which he worked on. He was known as a script doctor, as you can imagine, and he also worked on Good Will Hunting, among other movies. And of course, Ben Affleck and his compadre won an Oscar for their screenplay, and I have a hunch that it had more to do with William Goldman, perhaps, than I'm nothing against those guys, but that's just how much in awe I am of Goldman. He just really gave this story. And he made these guys who were anonymous, like I said, into these super Westerners. It's just part of the fabric now. And it gives us all hope that someday, maybe, someone will take our life and just write it up really good. And maybe there is hope for us. Well, let's go watch that thing again. It sure is a cool one. And I really love it. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Now you know the real story.